The Chosen Season 4, Episode 3, there's a ton of really good stuff in here, and probably the most scripture that I've actually had to bring out for this episode in its entirety. However, this section right here is one of my absolute favorites, and it has to do with a big miracle that we're seeing in Season 4, and that is the healing of the man born blind. So let's jump into this episode, let's talk about this scene right here, and talk about the scripture that kind of goes behind it. There's a lot of really interesting stuff, and it basically goes over the whole chapter 9 of John, and so we're going to go through this right here. Here we go. Oop.
Messiah, this is Jesus, the teacher.
The one who healed Shula.
I love Barnaby so much. So right before this, obviously, Jesus got the news that there's an edict out for him, trying to catch him in blasphemy, trying to catch him doing these miracles and doing these different things. Of course, Jesus doesn't care. He's going to continue to do the will of his Father. He's going to continue to do what he came here to do. And so he sees Uzziah right behind here, and we see that Shula and Barnaby and some of the other people that follow Jesus know Uzziah, and so they're trying to help him here. Jesus says that he's going to heal him. So they walk up to him, and they see him here. Big thing that's kind of wrong with this scene. This does not take place in Capernaum, and that is going to become very, very important as we continue on and watch the rest of this and read the scriptures to this. There are some major things that are being misplaced here with this storyline, but The Chosen is using it for a different purpose. I think it loses some of its credibility here. This is one of those miracles in scriptures where it's really important where it happens and why it happens that specific place. This is one of the areas where I'm kind of like, maybe they should have done this where it was supposed to be. So let's keep on watching and we'll go through the scripture in just a second.
And me.
He knows, Barnaby.
Barnaby, he's not deaf, he's blind. Shabbat Shalom, Uzziah.
Shabbat Shalom.
Rabbi, please answer this for us. Who sinned? Uzziah or his parents that he was born blind?
You're a friend of his?
Yes, and we've wondered for years.
It's not that this man sinned, or his parents, but that the work of God might be displayed in him.
So in scripture, in John chapter 9, we actually see that Jesus, this doesn't actually happen exactly this way, and there's a couple things that are different, but specifically, Jesus passed by a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents? I could kind of pass this by. This guy isn't necessarily a disciple that we know. He's not part of the apostles, but he definitely could be a disciple of Jesus that has been following him, one of the people that's been in Tent City, following Jesus wherever he goes and trying to listen to what he has to say. So he could be labeled as a disciple of Jesus. So that's fine there. That's good. Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Why do they ask this question in particular? The reason why people are asking this question is because in the Jewish understanding, historically and culturally, they were very keen on understanding why certain things happened, and they attributed all of these things towards sin. So if you had a malady, if you got sick, if your parents had a disability, if you had a disability, whatever it was, all of these things were attributed to sin. For example, leprosy, right? During the time of Jesus, leprosy was a skin condition of any sort, right? We know it as like Hansen's disease today, but any skin condition would be considered leprosy during the time of Jesus. However, all those people would have been labeled as sinners, right? As people who had done something in order to get this malady, right? And so here, because this is such a severe malady that this guy has been born blind, right? It doesn't make any sense for him to have sinned because he's had it since he was born, right? So if he didn't sin, then his parents must have sinned in order for him to become blind, right? Like God was punishing their offspring instead of punishing them. But Jesus doesn't go along with this, obviously, because he knows the truth. Not all of these things come forth because of sin, but because we live in a broken and fallen world. And so he says this, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. And this is the thing, with all of Jesus's healings, with all of everything that he does, it's for a purpose, right? Every healing that he does is for a purpose. Not all of that is written in the Bible, just like John talks about. If we were to write everything that happened with Jesus, there wouldn't be enough books on the planet for us to fill them, right? And so we don't know every single outcome of every single healing that Jesus did, but we do know that every single healing that Jesus did was not flippant. There was a specific reason for every single specific healing. And so we have to understand that as we go through. Now, Jesus continues in verse 4. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Now let's get into this here, this next section.
Listen carefully. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. And as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world.
We cannot work at night?
We have limited time on earth, Matthew. I have limited time.
Yep.
Let's not argue the sins of the past. We've got light to give.
When Jesus normally talks about light and darkness, especially in the book of John, this is a very, very key point here. All throughout the book of John, specifically, John talks about the light and how Jesus is the light. And Jesus says all throughout his ministry, he talks about how when it's day is the time when he is alive on earth, and night is coming when he will no longer be here on earth as a physical human being, right? And so those things are changing. And so this metaphor continues all throughout the book of John, but is very key here as well. I love how they're both writing this down. I love it.
Excuse me.
This might feel strange, but it will be worth it.
So Big James goes and gets a pail of water. This is not what happens in scripture. We're going to read through it in a second.
Put it there.
This, I think, is probably the biggest thing that I disagree with about this section right here and what they changed. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. I just wanted to let you know that less than 1% of the people that watch these videos actually help to support our channel. We've been working on this channel for 4 years now, and while it's taken a long time for us to get to where we are, we still need help from time to time to keep the stability of this channel. YouTube can be extremely fickle, and so Patreon is a great way to help us to continue having income that we know it's going to come in, and to help us to create better and better videos, more equipment, more traveling to places where we can talk about different things such as Chosen Con or the set of The Chosen, or even going to Israel. All of these things are things that we could never do without your help. And so thank you to everybody that is on Patreon now, and if you'd like to join, you can go to snipesupport.com to help us out. There's a bunch of extra content over there too, so it's not just a donation, it's also a service for you guys to get extra stuff, including full live streams, behind the scenes stuff. You get to vote on some of our content, and you get to know me and my wife Vanessa a bit more. So there's a lot of stuff there. We'd love to see you guys over there. Let's get back to the video.
Hold still. Now wash. Right here to your right.
All right, so we see how it happens in The Chosen. Let's see how it happens in Scripture. Okay, so we must work while it's day, because night is coming, blah, 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 right? I am the light of the world. Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with his saliva. This is very key, okay? Why would Jesus do this in particular? Well, there's a theory, because during the time, culturally for Jesus's time, saliva was seen as like this healing medicinal type of thing, right? But Jesus specifically puts his saliva in the mud in order to basically counteract those cultural things, okay? Jesus wasn't just randomly making mud, okay? He was putting his saliva in the mud to show that his spit is not the thing that's healing this whole process, it's God through him, right? Jesus himself is the one that's bringing this healing. And so the saliva thing is really important to understand that, okay? So point one, they do that correctly. He spits on the ground, he makes this mud. Then he anoints the man's eyes with the mud, okay? But then here's where the big difference is. I didn't tell you where this was supposed to take place yet because we're going to talk about it here. In The Chosen, right now, they are in Capernaum, okay? We're seeing Rabbi Josiah, we're seeing all the Capernaum people. They are in Capernaum here. We know that that's where they've been this whole season so far, basically. However, in the scriptures, they are in Jerusalem. And this is a totally different location for a totally different reason, right? So whenever they find this man, they find this random guy, he's been blind from birth, they talk to him, they go through this whole thing, Jesus heals him, and then he tells the man to go wash in the pool of Siloam. Now Siloam means sent. Okay, so he went and he washed and came back seeing. This is a huge, huge difference, right? Because in the scriptures, Jesus puts the onus on this man. If he believed and he went to the pool of Siloam, which is a giant mikveh, by the way, set up in order to cleanse yourself before you go into the temple. There's so much context here that's being missed in The Chosen because they changed the location. But again, they're using it for a different reason. So I understand why they're doing it. It's just definitely in this story in particular, it definitely changes a lot here. And so in scripture, we see as he goes to the pool of Siloam, which is a giant mikveh where people would go and wash themselves. It's down a large staircase right from the temple. Okay, so here's the temple. We see a large staircase down, and the bottom of that staircase is the giant pool of Siloam, okay? So he tells him, go and basically cleanse yourself. But what he's not just saying, go and take the mud off of your eyes. He's saying, and go and cleanse yourself spiritually so that you can come back to the temple, which he's going to go to right after this point, right? He's welcoming him back into the fold of Judaism, but also following God in general. Okay, so he's using the Jewish customs, he's using the Jewish places, the pool of Siloam, the temple, all these different things that are so important to Jewish culture. Jesus is doing this very specifically in order to bring him back into where he's at, okay, or where he's supposed to be, where he should be, right, as a follower of Jesus. And so now the neighbors, let me go over here. So the neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar, they don't believe it, okay? Because they're like, this guy was blind. He's not blind anymore. This isn't the same guy, right? Is that the guy that used to sit and beg? And then someone said, it is he. Others said, no, he looks like him, but he's not him, okay? I am the man, he said to them. And so they were really confused, right? How did you open your eyes? What is happening here? Remember? Because the guy went down to the pool by himself and washed. Jesus didn't go down with him and say, hey, everybody, look at this. He's about to be able to see, right? So this man went on his own with belief that he will go and see, and he washed off and his eyes were able to be opened, okay? He's so confused at this point too and like trying to figure out what's going on because he hasn't seen anything. He walks down to the pool of Siloam and now he's able to see. So they brought the Pharisees to the man who had been formerly blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. He put mud on my eyes and I washed and I see. That's all that this guy knows, right? Which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But others said, how can a man who is a sinner do such things? And there was a division among them. So let's catch up with The Chosen here.
That's it.
So he's healed here. I will point out as well, Rabbi Josiah sees this healing. I think that's a big part of this as well.
Wat is ik ook?
There's got to be so much sensory overload there too, because he's never seen before. And so this is a really, really big deal. Turning down the music a little bit for copyright here. We see him there just reacting. I mean, how would you react if you could see for the first time? It's got to be super overwhelming, for sure. Now there is Jeb. I think his name's Jeb. He's never really introduced in this show. We've seen him a couple of times, both with Veronica in season 3, and then of course here again in Capernaum. But in the credits, I think his name is Jeb. And of course, he's brought his family here to try to follow Jesus and be part of Tent City. He has a little small role in this episode here. And again, the return of another character.
Shalom.
We've got Rivka here. If you don't remember her, she was part of season 1. She was the matron of the Red Quarter who talked to Nicodemus before he went in to try to exorcise the demons from Mary. She was also in attendance at Matthew's dinner during the last episode of season 1 as well. We really haven't seen her since then. We've heard her name a couple of times, like in season 2 we heard her name, but now we finally get the return of Rivka here, who probably has changed her life since meeting Jesus before. She's possibly not the matron anymore of the Red Quarter. Maybe she's doing something else, but we don't really get any further storyline from her.
I heard Jesus was here.
Rivka, look.
Messiah? Messiah, what
The
happened?
man who used to sit and beg had very white eyes.
That's because he was blind.
Again, following the scripture, that's not him. It can't be him. He's not blind. No, he's not blind anymore.
Now,
Yes, now, to the synagogue.
I can't think of a better place.
I can't think of a better place.
Thank you.
So Josiah is going in. If
They
you
want
don't
to see me at the
remember,
synagogue.
Sure they do.
Tell my parents what happened, and then I'm at the synagogue.
Josiah as well has been around since season 1. He's been in a couple episodes of season 1, but he's also mentioned during the children episode, season 1, episode 3, and throughout a bunch of other stuff. But he's become a more prominent character this season, particularly this episode.
Absolutely. Right away. Where do they live?
How would I know? I was blind the whole time I knew him.
We'll ask around. Let's go.
Do another miracle!
That's not how this works. But I have much to share with you. So listen carefully. Everybody come closer.
We'll talk about that in just a second. We're going to move forward to the rest of the section here. We're going to go into the Pharisees' office as they bring in this man born blind, Uzziah.
What's so urgent?
The teacher, Jesus of Nazareth, he's here in Capernaum right now. He just healed this man.
How can you be certain it's him?
I've met him before. Rabbi Akiva, there you are. Jesus of Nazareth is here. He just healed this man of blindness in the marketplace.
What do you mean? It's Shabbat.
I know.
I love how they're more concerned with it being Shabbat than someone being healed. Very Pharisee, for sure.
You were blind?
Was, yes.
How did you receive your sight?
He put mud on my eyes. And I wash. And I see.
Sorcery and dark arts.
That's exactly what I thought.
We have not seen him do sorcery.
This man has broken Sabbath, broken bread with Gentiles, and made false claims and heresies. He is not from
If
God.
he is such a sinner, how can he do these signs?
You, what do you say about him?
He's obviously a prophet. Look what he did to me.
Messiah, are you?
So these are his parents. We're going to get to that in just a second. So let's go back to scripture. So we said, how can a man who is a sinner do such things? That's what Jairus just said here. And there's a division among them. So they said again, the blind man, what do you say about him since you opened your eyes? And he said, he is a prophet. So we see that there. I love how closely to scripture they stuck to this portion of it. However, they did obviously miss big portions of it by not being in Jerusalem, not sending him to the pool of Siloam, those kind of things there. So it's a bit different for sure. The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight. So the parents came in, okay? And they asked him, is this your son who you say is born blind? How then does he now see? His parents answered, we know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but how he sees we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself. Now this is really, really important because they're kind of lying here, which is kind of weird. This is a weird situation. They're kind of lying because they were afraid to confess Jesus as the Messiah. They didn't want to seem like they were on Jesus's side, but most likely they saw what happened to their son, or at least fully believed it if they had heard about it, right? So this verse 22 kind of explains that. It says, his parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess to be the Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue, okay? So this most likely was to be put out of the temple. in Jerusalem. Okay, so this is not just a small thing of like you are getting in trouble for thinking Jesus is the Christ. This is like a banishment type of thing. So this is pretty heavy stuff that the parents are having to deal with. So they basically lie to them saying, we don't know how this happened. Ask him. He can speak for himself. Just ask him. He's of age. And that's exactly what we see in The Chosen as well.
Your eyes? Can you see me?
This is your son?
Yes.
And he was born blind?
Yes.
How can he see?
They told us the teacher from the... Well, we know he's our son and he was born blind. But how he sees and who opened his eyes, we do not know. Have you asked him? He's of age.
I love how tight the scripture is here. Really, really good stuff.
You need to tell me how he did this.
I already told you and you wouldn't listen. All I know is this man must be from God. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. He must be the Christ, or he couldn't have done this.
No. If all of this is true, give glory only to Adonai for this. This teacher from Nazareth is a sinner.
Whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know. That though I was blind, now I see.
So good. So going back to scripture and ending this section here, we see whether he was a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, direct quote here, that though I was blind, now I see. So really, really good stuff here. They keep on asking him, what did he do to you? Blah, blah, blah. I've already told you. You would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? I love that quote right there. They don't use that in The Chosen like this. I thought it would be hilarious if they did, just to see Rabbi Akiva's reaction to that, but they didn't use it here. And they reviled him, saying, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. They're claiming a higher order, right? They're like, Moses is obviously the best and biggest Jew. He is the one, right? Whereas Jesus obviously supersedes Moses. Before Abraham, I am, right? That's what Jesus says. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from. The man answered, why? This is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. Now that's obviously they mixed up the dialogue there, put that before that, and then ended with the punchline, which is I was blind but now I see, because it's a really strong line there. And this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, you were born in utter sin, and you would teach us? And then they cast him out. And that's exactly what happens here. I love that.
You were born in utter sin,
Jairus.
and you preach at us in our own synagogue? You know the edict. Anyone who blasphemes by calling this sinner Christ, he is banned.
No, please. He doesn't know what he's saying. Please. We just know he was born
Out!
blind.
No!
Yep. So that's pretty much where it ends there. And we see here, verse 35, it kind of ends. Jesus heard that, and they cast him out, and having found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? He answered, and who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? And so Jesus, it's so funny. He's talking to this man that was born blind, and the man does not recognize the voice of Jesus. He doesn't recognize Jesus. And so this happens later. This isn't in The Chosen. I wish they had done this scene, but they took a lot of time to do what they already did. So they probably didn't have time. But Jesus says, do you believe in the Son of Man? And the man born blind says, and who is he, sir, that I might believe in him? Jesus said to him, you have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. And so beautiful, beautiful moment there. Yeah, really, really great stuff. That's all of John chapter 9. I definitely encourage you to go and read it and check it out. That was a really powerful moment in this scene. And of course, it kicks off everything else for the 7 woes to the Pharisees and all that kind of stuff that we're going to talk about in another video. So yeah, really, really good stuff there. Craziness.